But also, I think one of the other things that would have shocked people, whatever they think about this debate, is that 50,000 asylum seekers have gone missing in Britain, and that they are not trackable. So the system seems to be
breaking down
completely in a shambles.
No, but see, this is the interesting. This is where the hypocrisy, really rank hypocrisy, comes in. I completely agree with you that the panic now is to get the overall numbers down, and the majority of those are good immigrants from the European Union that nobody can do anything about. But what I find really shocking is that the Home Office, once people are here and they're lost, they're losses. You can't have a win, an easy win, as far as the Home Office is concerned, by saying we've rounded up 60,000, 70,000 illegal immigrants, because that's too high cost, it doesn't make a good headline, it's hard to shepherd a huge number. But you can look strong by letting hundreds of thousands of people drown, potentially, in the sea. And so that's where I think, your original question was right, you know, how do you stop people from coming in and how do you stop them from getting lost? The focus is those that are lost here already have been completely abandoned. Nobody's looking after, nobody's looking for them. When the Home Office sends these kind of go-home vans and posters across London, what they're trying to do is look tough on immigration, but when you talk to people on the street, on the ground, trying to combat it, they're saying there are hundreds of thousands of people that are lost in the system, and nobody's making any effort to find them.
There's also an effort. We really put pressure on Turkey, on all these countries, to fight, of course, the people who take the money from this human trafficking, which are doing a good business with it. So it's a multi-phase. It's not only, and Turkey has taken many refugees, I agree, but they are allowing these, and Libya and all the country are allowing this traffic. So we have to get more generous, I think, especially countries which are rich, but we have also to fight the people who benefit.
But, you know, the irony is that one of the reasons that so many immigrants want to come here, for example, instead of staying in France, is because the British are actually much nicer on the whole to assimilable minorities. The French, I'm sorry to say, Mark, have a terrible reputation for being nastier to immigrants than the British. And it's
That's not true. It's a multicultural society like Britain. It's the same. Like Germany, we all are multicultural societies.
One last point. If that is true, Britain actually, this might seem slightly, you know, naive, but Britain has a moral responsibility. It talks a big game about how it's enforcing all these good principles and its foreign policy is kind of muscular.
No, I'm talking on a community.
No, I know on a community, but in general,
people.
this should percolate upwards, I think. And I think Britain talks a very big game in terms of its immigration policies,
and that's
but actually doesn't actually...
Why do you want to limit? Why do you want to limit then the Europeans coming here, and that it's illegal, absolutely illegal?
Yes, that's the trouble. Yes, it's illegal. It can't be made illegal.
Well, you are still
hang on, just one second.
Finish on that, then I want to come on to...
If we have a moral responsibility, so does Italy for Libya.
Absolutely.
So does France for Northern Africa.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, this is an ex-colonial problem.
An ex-colonial problem, and actually a neo-colonialist interventionist problem. Europe and the US meddle in foreign policy in these issues all the time, and they can't take
Right,
the
well, let's move on, because this is a connected issue, because two political parties once considered to be on the fringe of British politics may hold the balance of power after the general election next year. UKIP are causing problems especially for the Conservatives in England, and the Scottish National Party, if you believe the opinion polls, could win enough seats from Labour in Scotland to ensure a hung parliament. Is the British two- or three-party system now at an end? And this is, of course, related, at least in the UKIP case, to the immigration question.
Absolutely. I mean, it's clear that in every country in Europe, the two-three parties traditional have gone. In France, it's the same. You have the National Front being very strong, and some French left-wing also being very strong. Is the same in every country. So Britain is not immune to that. The fact that it has lived on this system, which two established and a third one who succeed themselves in power, is gone. No, the problem is not exactly the same, UKIP and SNP. SNP is all comprehending, SNP is on the left, SNP is, for me, pro-European, UKIP is just the reverse. I find it a nasty party. I have nothing against the people who vote for them. That's not the problem. The party is nasty, and that's the difference.
Die Alternative in Germany is also similar. I mean, there are obviously differences. So every big society, the United States with the Tea Party movement, Syriza in Greece, Beppe Grillo in Italy, the existing system that we've come to know over years, is breaking up in a lot of
Yeah,
places.
and I find it almost amusing, this shock and awe. We have 3 or even 4 parties in the parliament. I mean, it's something that the UK has to come to terms with it, because it's normality in all the other European countries. As you see in Germany, we now have 4 or 5 parties, and in fact, the Liberals, who were very traditional parties, are now out of the Bundestag, of the parliament. You have the Alternative für Deutschland in, you have the Greens, you have the Left, you have the Pirate Party for a time. And you just have to make it work. And interestingly, actually, in Germany, if you look what has been happening in the last decade, we've been seeing grand coalitions. So actually, the small parties, though messing up kind of the political landscape, are now in opposition. And twice we had mandates with grand coalitions. So
Meaning the centre-left and centre-right.
The centre-left, the big parties get together to steer the country through the crisis. And I'd be really intrigued to see whether, not now and not in the next 10 years, but eventually there will be something like a grand coalition also in this country.
I bet you can't wait for a Miliband-Cameron coalition.
Oh, yes. It would be Miliband-SNP. That would be the real nice
Miliband-SNP.
Very nice government.
But you have to realise that they dislike each other possibly even more.
Even more.
Intensely, yes. I mean, not to put make it sound too grand, but there is a crisis of democratic politics in almost all the Western countries now. Everybody hates everybody in the governing class. And the only people who are getting a look in, well, it is true here, and it's true in America as well. The Republicans are no more popular than the Democrats, even though they're probably going to win the Senate. And in this rise of the outsider party, the party that isn't implicated in what seems to be a conspiracy by the governing class to ignore the opinions of ordinary people, this is, whether it's true or not, whether that perception is accurate, that is the perception of the moment. The reason that parties like UKIP, which have such incoherent economic policies and which, can't say 2 consistent things in a row, are gaining so much traction, and the SNP, even though Scottish nationalism has been defeated in the referendum, are gaining so dramatically.
But they're very different from UKIP, not just in the politics.
I'm saying
they have a coherent vision of what they want.
But it's not to do with actually the political views necessarily of these parties. It's to do with the fact that they are outsiders to the system. There is a rebellion by ordinary people who are disgusted with the established governing parties of even the official opposition.
But I think Stephanie is suggesting we should celebrate that.
I don't see it as a crisis. It's democracy in development. It's democracy in process.
It may have a happy ending, but there's no telling. I mean, the point is that there is a danger that people will become seriously disillusioned with the idea of democratic politics. And I think the National Front in France is a very real threat to the idea of democratic politics. That is a true neo-fascist party.
Absolutely.
I agree with you. I think that it isn't necessarily a crisis, and there is a good thing, a good point about it, that actually I don't agree that the US is in the same boat. I think the reason why the issue is now less party against party and more establishment against the people is that Europe has kind of figured out all the major problems in terms of controversial political positions. For example, in the US, there's still a very big separation between right and left on major issues, like abortion, like gay rights, like how to run the economy, like the NHS, like having a public healthcare system. These big questions, more or less, not to say that there is consensus, but they more or less have been hammered out, especially in the UK. You have a big centre. The right is now right of centre, left of centre.
That's precisely what's so alienating, is the idea of this consensus which overwhelms all opinion. You have to belong to what is really a quite narrow spectrum of consensual opinion in order to play the game.
But I agree with you.
What is not consensual is immigration.
That's what Europe. That's what I was coming to. That the 2 issues that have remained in the United Kingdom and Europe that are still big issues are immigration and Europe. And when there is a party like UKIP, there is, in terms of the scraps to pick up and try and polarize debate, those are the 2 things. And so that's where people are right when they accuse fringe parties like UKIP of being opportunistic, is because it appears that sometimes they're not interested in policy, but interested in the inflammatory issues. And those are the 2 remaining ones.
But you can't put them all in the same thing. SNP and UKIP.
SNP are very different.
BNP is not a fascist party.
Absolutely.
It may be, but the point is that these are parties which are making, perhaps opportunistically, but perhaps sincerely, we can't sort of judge that, are trying to make a connection with the views and the discontents of ordinary people. And the feeling is that the political establishment, precisely because of the consensus that you describe, despises the views of ordinary people if they don't fit into that consensus.
But that's because, is that not because in many cases the political establishment is seen to be very different? And so what you have in, one thing that UKIP and the SNP do have in common is you look at Nigel Farage, you look at some of the leading members of the SNP, they seem like ordinary people, much more ordinary, normal people.
Of the people.
It's got nothing to do with their politics, they're just recognisably human.
Yeah, but so then you must ask the question why the established parties cannot take the example and turn back to the people and go out and try to pick up what's the everyday life. I mean, this Westminster bubble and this famous photos of the three leaders of the party who exactly look the same. Well, they have to do something about it.
Yes, I think that's right.
They seem almost immobile, like the rabbit sitting in front of the...
And it's particularly difficult because, at the end, you need the traditional party to govern. You can't have the fringe party to govern. Every country where the fringe party have governed has been a disaster.
Oh, yes. No, but you do, and the problem is because of this consensus mainstream establishment, it attracts technocrats. You know, it attracts administrators. It doesn't attract characters, and that's why we all look the same.
Let's move on.